All right. So before I get going here, let's pull up some true crime music. Got a little playlist here. I'm just gonna see which one fits the mood. I don't know. It's just a bunch of film noir shit. I don't know. I've actually never listened to a true crime podcast or of any kind. I don't know what kind of music they play. I'm just guessing it's like some slow jazz shit. Okay. Let's see here. Let's try this first song. That's a little too on the nose, isn't it? I mean, I like it, but a classic song. But you know, everyone's already heard it. All right, let's try the next one. Oh, that's nice. Oh yeah. Oh baby, that's good. Oh. That was it. That's really good, but it's a little too sexy for a football game recap. It's making me think of potentially taking my shirt off right now, honestly. I mean, it's a podcast. None of you you're not gonna see anything, but like, you know, getting a little hot in here. Anyway, okay, let's try the next one. Okay, it's not good either. This doesn't fit at all. Okay. This next one's gonna be fine. I swear. Okay, got the true crime music going. Get my true crime voice going. It was the summer of 1999. All right, there we go. Okay. What were we talking about again? We're gonna recap a high school football game. Yeah, okay. It's the summer of 2021, and a humble high school football program in Florida is gearing up for another season of playing America's favorite sport. There's only one problem. No team wants to play them. You see, unlike in more formal professional sports leagues, American high school and college sports schedules aren't made up by a centralized league who make a predictable schedule every year based off a fancy algorithm. Instead, each team within a state's athletic association is responsible for creating their own schedules within the rules of their association. Each association within each state could have dozens up to hundreds of potential opponents, so quite a bit of work has to be done, not only to find appropriate opponents, but to make sure the resulting schedule is convenient. That way, these ostensible students don't have to make large cuts to their academic and social lives to play ball. Thus, schools tend to schedule some very obvious matchups, for example, their local town's other high school and the other high schools around their town. Otherwise, if they are a school of considerable means, they hire someone else to handle it, a third party. Our humble Florida high school's third-party henchman here, Paragon Marketing, at the dawn of the new high school season, can't find a single team that wants to play against their client. Not a one. Because our humble Florida high school, IMG Academy, isn't quite so humble. They are, in fact, one of the most famous high school football programs at the national level. In the past, they have regularly played against the best teams from across this great nation of ours, and not just in Florida. In 2020, IMG won the national championship, as in, they came in first in the official national high school rankings. And they did so by, as one journalist put it, quote, winning all 8 games by a combined score of 381 to 82, end quote. That same journalist wrote that going into the 21 season, IMG had on their roster 6 5-star players, 15 4-star players, 8 3-star players, and 5 others with multiple college offers, end quote. And, dear listener, you don't have to know about what those stars mean exactly to know that more is better. The great majority of high schools across this great nation of ours are starving to just have one 3-star player. Very few teams in the nation can boast this type of firepower, and thus very few teams in the nation want to play against them and risk posting a loss on their record, which would reflect badly on them in their local association's rankings. This is the price of success, of course, the price of success and wealth. On top of that, this isn't just any game being played either. ESPN is having what the fuck is this called again? Having their Geico ESPN high school kickoff event the weekend at the end of August. And IMG Academy has found themselves not only playing a nationally televised game on ESPN Geico kickoff whatever, but playing that game in Canton, Ohio. Canton, whatever. The town where the Pro Football Hall of Fame is located. A monument to the legends of times past, now simultaneously the site of the future professional stars of the NFL. It's important for teams like IMG Academy to have these types of games, to get this sort of media attention, especially if they win. It keeps their prestige high and media contracts fat. But that's only if anyone wants to play. Paragon Marketing tries their best. I mean, I guess. But no team wants IMG in Canton. So, that is when Paragon make the decision to call in the help of a one-time Florida football insider, Joe Maimone. I heard his name pronounced before. I can't remember. Joe Maimone. I'm going to say it like that until I correct it later on. Joe Maimone, CEO of Prep Gridiron Logistics. Maimone and Prep Gridiron Logistics, PGL, do exactly what it sounds like they do. They deal with the nitty-gritty of matchmaking for high schools at the national level. Maimone has said, reportedly, that the company makes no money, and he does what he does out of genuine love of student football. But other sources have said that their main income comes from a cut of the media deals that come about thanks to their matchmaking. In May 2021, Maimone and PGL signed a 4-year deal with Flow Sports, a Florida sports broadcasting company, to produce and broadcast Florida high school football matchups. And while the numbers of that deal haven't been made public yet, you don't need to be a fellow Florida insider to know that sports are a big deal and mean big bucks in the Sunshine State. Sunshine State, is that what it's called? Florida? That's a nickname, right? Right? I'm not gonna look it up. Maimone picks up Paragon's call. That's weird, right? So like, okay, so Paragon, so the company that had this work outsourced to them by the school is now outsourcing the work to a second company. Like, isn't that like really weird? Like, wouldn't that, like, if you were IMG Academy, wouldn't it be like, what? Why would we hire you? I don't know. That's really weird. Anyway, Maimone picks up Paragon's call. If a large marketing corporation can't get it done, perhaps a plucky football fan who matchmakes for the love of the game, supposedly, can. So Maimone and PGL send out flyers through their network of connections, meaning like they send a mass email. And no one responded. No one. Not a single school. And now it looks like ESPN, IMG Academy, and Paragon Marketing might end up with a canceled high school game and a lot of egg on their face. Except when it seemed like there was nowhere else to go, one high school came out of the blue, out of the woodwork, and saved the day. Bishop Sycamore High School. BS from here on out and whenever I feel like. BS 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 was a local Ohio program. All the more better for ESPN Geico Week, whatever the fuck it's called. And at the time, Bishop Sycamore had, quote, double-digit D1 recruits on its 2021 roster. They fear no one, end quote. D1 here meaning Division I, which is the highest level of college football in the NCAA system in the United States. So this team had players already on their way to playing adult football in the most prestigious university football programs in the nation. Now, who said the quote I just read out? More on that later. But the point is that this was shaping up to be a clash of titans. IMG Academy, one of the best high school football programs in the country, flying into Ohio to play against a local kingpin, both with future stars of the NCAA and possibly future stars of the NFL all over their rosters. It's finally all settled. PGL gets thanked and paid for their work. Paragon, by the skin of their teeth, fulfills their obligations to ESPN and IMG Academy. And both IMG Academy and ESPN are saved from the embarrassment of having to cancel the most important game in Geico-thon High School Week. Just one of many similar months of business and deal making that happens behind the scenes every year in youth sports. Except, this would not become just another month among many in youth sports. It would become one of the biggest spectacles in recent American sports history. Not only in youth sports, but this is not because the American high school football loving public was treated to an instant classic of a game, of the most talented teenage athletes in the nation engaged in a fireworks exhibition of a contest that went down to the wire. Quite the opposite, in fact. Quite the opposite of all those words, actually. This game would become, the only word I think is appropriate here, an embarrassment for all involved, broadcasted on national television for all to see. So we don't have to go through. I'm sorry, true crime segment over. Going back to regular voice. Okay, so we don't have to go over the actual game in any great detail, mostly because there's not a lot to share about it, honestly. And I don't want you, the listener, to think that you need to know any more than the very basics about sports or sports organizing to understand what the point of this episode is. It's enough to say that, like, the punchline of my little recap just now is that Bishop Sycamore was not actually stacked with some of the best high school football prospects in the country. Not quite from the very beginning, but fairly early into the game, it became obvious to everyone watching that Bishop Sycamore wasn't even in the same solar system as IMG Academy in terms of quality. Halfway through the second quarter, so about 22 minutes of game time, IMG was winning 30-0, and then they eventually go on to beat Bishop Sycamore by a score of 58-0. But the fact that IMG was dominating wasn't really what was tipping people off, because that happens all the time in normal games throughout the course of a year in any high school football league, in any high school football association, right? That's totally normal. It was how easy it was looking for IMG that was really tipping people off. There was simply no way a team with real 3- and 4-star recruits would be playing as badly as Bishop Sycamore was during this game. To that point, I mentioned the halfway point of the second quarter as a reference because that was when the ESPN announcers for that game had their now infamous soundbite of them talking about how ESPN was told that Bishop Sycamore had multiple D1 recruits on the team, and are now learning that that wasn't the case, and how the game needs to be stopped for the health of the players on Bishop Sycamore.
Bishop Sycamore told us they had a number of Division I prospects on their roster. To be frank, a lot of that we could not verify. And they did not show up in our database. They did not show up in the databases of other recruiting services. So it's okay. If that's what you're telling us, fine. That's how we take it in. From what we've seen so far, this is not a fair fight. And there's got to be a point now, Lugs, where you do worry about health and safety.
I already am worried about it. I think it's this could potentially be dangerous.
And that was also when most of the tweets and other online reactions to the game really blew up. Soon the whole nation learned that there were no D1 recruits on Bishop Sycamore. Obviously, soon after that, they were also learning that not only are a lot of Bishop Sycamore's players playing two-way, as in they are both playing offense and on defense in the same game, something that is very rare in American football for all sorts of mostly health and fitness reasons, but that many of those players, in fact, I think almost all of the players playing in the Bishop Sycamore game for Bishop Sycamore had also played a full game of football 2 days ago. Again, for those of you who may not know, full contact American football isn't a sport that you can play multiple games in a row without just crazy risk of injury and long-term health consequences. So it isn't like club association football, soccer, if you're a fucking American, or like baseball, which is, physical sports, no doubt. I'm not saying they're not, but they're sports that lack like the great amounts of just prolonged violence that is inherent to American football. There's a very real possibility of these guys, these Bishop Sycamore players, like they really were just guys, right? As we'll see in a second, right? Not like 90th percentile athletes. A possibility of these guys breaking every bone in their body and having heart attacks right there on the field and fucking dying. And I do want to take this time to say that if you were someone from Ohio, right, a big fan of high school football from Ohio, so imagine you were a total fucking freak, and you're also online a lot, right, a freak, then there were alarm bells ringing about this game from even before kickoff. There were a bunch of tweets from Ohio folks asking why Bishop Sycamore, which, many diehard Ohio high school football fans, aka sickos, had never heard of before August 29th, why they were getting to play this extremely important nationally televised game as though Bishop Sycamore was representing the state of Ohio to the team coming from Florida. Many were pointing out, these Ohio folks, that Bishop Sycamore wasn't even registered with the state of Ohio's athletic association. So yeah, just wanted to shout out people from Ohio who smelled something fishy right from the very beginning. In fact, probably even before the summer when people released their schedules. Soon after, and throughout the months after the game, people outside of Ohio became more and more aware of Bishop Sycamore's story. And throughout the months after the game, Bishop Sycamore became increasingly referred to as barely existing by various news outlets. So what does that mean, a school barely existing? To start, Bishop Sycamore, as I'm sure you could have guessed, wasn't this legacious and decorated prestige high school and football program with a history of great players going up through 9th through 12th grade in their school and then up through college and then the NFL, The earliest you could say that Bishop Sycamore existed was back in 2018. So they were barely 3 years old when they played against IMG Academy for this famous game. The articles I've read across a handful of different outlets describe the school's identity pretty differently. Some call it a non-charter, non-tax school. Others refer to it specifically as an online-only charter school. Leaders of the school, quote-unquote leaders, right, massive air quotes leaders of the school describe the school as having its own facilities just like any normal school and has both fully online and traditional in-person classes. On the other hand, many investigators and regular internet users couldn't find any publicly available information about Bishop Sycamore anywhere. Going back to 2018, Bishop Sycamore never had a functioning website. There was no way to see, for example, what kind of classes they were offering as part of their normal curriculum. Calling the phone numbers that Bishop Sycamore folks offered sometimes resulted in, that automated, this number has been canceled, a message you get when you dial a bad number or whatever. Or else if they were actually, in those rare times that people were actually answered by a human being, they were directed to other numbers. And then those numbers would often have like full voicemail boxes. Whatever addresses for the school that were given were either PO boxes or residential addresses, as in it was the address for a person's regular ass house. And and this was the school that was sold to Paragon and to ESPN as one of the premier football programs in Ohio. Like, to any person with more than a quarter of their brain, like, all of this looks like just some extremely obvious scam. Like, all the red flags are there. It's like rattling off the scheme of the protagonists of an episode of American Greed. And after learning about all this, like seeing this team get blasted by a real football program, and then learning they seem to exist more as like a concept than as like a corporeal entity, right? The question everyone had was, how the hell did this team trick ESPN and Paragon and IMG Academy to play this game? And well, first of all, they didn't trick IMG into anything, but more on that later. Secondly, that question, like, I don't think that question is really interesting at all. That's not an interesting question to me, because we know how they got on the game. Like, I answered that question. I already answered that question. I answered that pretty succinctly in the recap of how they were scheduled. ESPN needed a matchup for IMG Academy on their most important game of that week. A third party was hired to get that second team. That third party was Paragon. Paragon hired another company to send feelers, which is, I guess that's just something they can do. They can just hire another company to do their work for them. That was Prep Gridiron Logistics to send out feelers, and only one team, let me just say that again, only one team called back, and that was Bishop Sycamore. It was all sort of last minute too. They were all scrambling to get this game together. Like, no one checked on anything. No one went to go look at the fucking PO boxes or whose ever fucking house Bishop Sycamore put as their school's address, right? No one checked, not ESPN, not Paragon, not Mimone, and not PGL, because I'll just spoil this part of the video right now. All of those people, all the names I just said, they're all extremely cynical actors in a sector of American society that's suddenly becoming flush with cash, right? That's not a complicated process at all. It's actually quite simple to understand why they got onto that game. I think what people want to ask when they wonder how Bishop Sycamore got this game, taking everything they learned about Bishop Sycamore after the fact, is how is Bishop Sycamore even allowed to exist in the first place? Like, why wasn't what so powerfully reeks of a scam not shut down immediately by any of the responsible authorities before it got to this point? Like, Bishop Sycamore was allowed to go on, quote unquote, recruiting players and playing full seasons of football for about 3 years before the public caught wind of what was happening and the other shoe dropped. For 3 years, they were allowed to do this. And now we're getting into the real nitty-gritty of education policy and education politics, which is what, this is what the show is about, right? At least part of it. That's part of what the show is about. This fucking podcast. So how and why were Bishop Sycamore able to evade basically any kind of accountability from the education system in Ohio? And to answer that question, we obviously have to go back to the roots of Bishop Sycamore's creation and try to tie that back to what Ohio's education laws and culture were like back then.